Welcome to the 5 More Minutes podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 5. So we are talking today. Our theme this month is the end of average. And so the video that we showed on the YouTube channel, if you haven't seen it, is connected to the book, The End of Average by Todd Rose. And so definitely go take a look at that if you haven't seen it. But so today is December 9th, and we're getting close to the holidays. This weekend, my brother and sister-in-law came into town from Edmonton, and what's really exciting about them is that my sister-in-law is pregnant with twins. So this is a big deal. There are a lot of twins that run in our family. My mom is a twin, and my aunt, my mom's sister, her first set of grandchildren were also twins. So my mom's first set of grandchildren are going to be twins. So it's all very, very, very exciting. So we had a little Christmas baby shower for them this weekend. And we took them out to Bowen Island. Jessica and I we bought a house recently there. And so we're looking to move in probably in the new year. So yeah, so that was big. Jessica made a huge turkey dinner. And it was just like this dreamiest night with Christmas music. And you know how cozy it is around the holidays. But I'm telling you this because a few days ago, my very good friend Jill, who also lives in Edmonton, she sent me a text. And her and I have been friends for a very long time. And she goes, Shelly, like, what's the best thing that's happening in your life right now? And she's so insightful. So she always kind of sends me these little cute texts like that. And so I thought about it. And when I responded to her, I was just like, I couldn't really pick up one thing. But what really hit me was, like, the life that I'm living right now is like not even a life I could have imagined. And so what I said back to her was just like, I never thought that my life could be so happy and I could feel so fulfilled. And like, the reason why I'm telling you that is because I think like that sense that I'm in right now is really connected to this theme. So if you know anything about Todd Rose, you know that he had a very bumpy start to life. Similar to me, we both very much struggled in school, which is why I was very drawn to his books. And because I really very much struggled and never thought that I would have the success that I do, being able to tell stories and work in an area of passion, feel like I'm making a difference, like I really feel like I have purpose. And but it didn't start out that way, and so I think the guest, we're going to be talking to Todd Rose today, and I just really feel that I connect with him on that, and how both of us kind of found our own success in our own way and kind of broke the mold of average to find success and to find our own path. So if you don't know about Todd Rose, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. I first was introduced to him when I forget who introduced me to the book, but it was the Book of Average, and I downloaded it on Audible because I was doing a lot of driving in my job, and so I was listening to his book, and there were times where I would like keep driving so I could finish off a chapter or whatever, and I would drive like an extra few times around the block because it just was so engaging and so accessibly written. So he, the whole book is good. Definitely go read it. But the one part that really stood out to me was the metaphor that he talks about the military airplanes. And this is the metaphor we talk about in the 5 More Minutes video. But that metaphor really, really hit home to me because it really helped give me the words and helped me kind of explain and articulate why my experience in school was so hard and it's not just me, like there's so many people that I talk to, and both growing up and today that for so long thought that they were broken. And it's just so disheartening because some of the most successful people I know are people that didn't fit inside the box. And this is, a lot what Todd talks about. And so originally today I had a different plan. Like my plan for the podcast today was to talk to people who didn't fit in the mold and people who kind of found their own success. But then cousin Paul, who, as you know, produces all of the 5 More Minutes content, he just, in his, dream big kind of ways, he sent me a text. He's like, hey, Shelly. And this wasn't months ago. This was like last Saturday. And he's just like, why don't you like try and get a hold of Todd Rose? And I'm like, Paul, I'm not Oprah. Like, there's no way. Todd Rose works at Harvard. He is like a big wig in the world. He's got like best-selling books. There's no way. He's like, Paul's like, I think you should just try. So Paul, thanks for the push because by the next morning, Todd had responded. And so kind of now I just keep thinking, well, who else can I get on this podcast, right? So, the rest is history. So last Wednesday, Todd Rose and I, at bright and early 7 a.m. Vancouver time, we Skyped and drank a cup of coffee with Todd Rose, which I think was pretty exciting. And I got to talk to him about the metaphor that he uses in the book and kind of what new project he has coming up. And I feel pretty lucky about that experience, because I really believe that Todd is an incredible individual and he's changing the world through story, which is kind of what I'm trying to do. And so I felt quite a lot of connection with him. If you don't know Todd Rose, though, I've been learning more about him, over time, but he's the author of End of Average, as you know, but he's also written a book called Square Peg, which is about his own experience growing up, and then his newest book is called Dark Horse, which Todd will talk about in this podcast. But in his life now, he's the co-founder of a social impact organization called Populous, which I encourage you to look up. He's the director of the Mind, Brain, and Education program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and he leads the Laboratory for the Science of Individuality, which I just absolutely love. He is from Utah. He's a high school dropout, and he found a way to fight back at the education system, and he found his path and success along his way. So I got to ask him about that too, which, he just has a great story. So sit back and relax, and let me introduce you to Mr. Todd Rose. Hi, nice to see you. So to kind of, so everyone, this is Todd Rose. Say hi to Todd Rose.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. So I have to tell you, that video is part of this kind of series throughout the year. So one video is released every month, and they're kind of all around this theme of inclusive education and teaching to diversity. And I use that airplane metaphor all the time, because that connection to curriculum and that self-adjustment piece or whatever. And so when my cousin Paul, who lives in New York, and he's like, maybe you should get Todd Rose on your podcast because there's a podcast next week. And I'm just like, I'm not going to get Todd Rose on my podcast. Like, there's no way. And he's like, I think you should try. And so I sent you the emails the next morning. I'm like, cousin Paul, shoot for the stars. And so the reason why your metaphor really sticks out to me is because, like, I think in metaphors are very much kind of how I learn and how I think or whatever. And I was also someone who really struggled in school, and so, like, just really connected with you on that as well. But in that book, The End of Average, that's what really caught my attention. So I'm curious about, that specific metaphor. Like, what led you to that?
Yeah. So what's interesting is it was pretty accidental. In my scientific work, I'm part of a field called the Science of Individuality, Science of Individual, which gets away from using averages to study people.
Yeah.
And I got curious, like, really, one day I was like, wait a minute, like, where did this all, like, why did we ever think this was a good idea?
Totally.
Really? Like, why? And so I started trying to just understand the history of that. And that was just more my own curiosity that then eventually turned into a book.
Yes.
As part of that, I actually, I use this really like specific, but I use a piece of software called Papers to organize my journal articles.
Yes.
And the things it does is it makes recommendations, and I was digging in, and I was pulling all this individuality research in, and one of the things that came up was this Gilbert Daniels, the sort of myth of the average person, and it was a military document, and I was like, that's really interesting. I started digging into it, and then that just led me down a rabbit hole of wow, there's this whole story that people don't really know. And I think really does work as a metaphor for where we're at right now in education.
It totally does, right? And that's what I found. It totally made this complex idea so accessible to people, and I was kind of looking at reviews of the book, and this, that book changed people's lives. You know what I mean? It totally helped them. So kudos to you. So it's just a little bit about our context. So in British Columbia right now, we have gone through this whole curriculum redesign, really trying to move away from this idea of standardized curriculum and move it to more standard-based, right? So you have more of that room for adjustment. And what I really like about that airplane metaphor is basically it's helped people see the connection between universal design and universal design for learning, right? And it kind of bridges that. Because in the physical world, we understand, but in the intellectual world, we really don't. And so I guess my question to you now is kind of, so you saw the video about that we made and kind of how we've connected it to curriculum. And so I'm wondering, like, what was your reaction to the video that you saw and kind of your feedback or thoughts towards it?
Yeah. So I thought it was great, and I thought it was like really well produced too, which I think that's really terrific. And
my cousin Paul is he's totally self-taught. He's totally brilliant. He's amazing. Yeah.
And I thought it was like spot on. So as you can imagine, sort of fortunate in the sense that like End of Average actually has done really well, actually globally.
Yeah, totally.
It's been very surprising. It's been a bestseller a lot of places, and so it starts showing up in all kinds of places. But sometimes people understand it
differently.
First of all, I thought you got it spot on. So that
was great.
And then again, I think that was really important is you extending that into what I see as like autonomy and agency of like let's make sure in our efforts to create more flexible curriculum materials, we don't make the mistake of thinking that it's something we're still doing to and for kids alone, right? Yeah. And actually, a big part of this is like the ultimate personalization is when you're equipping kids with the self-knowledge and self-regulating skills to be able to make their own choices.
Oh my goodness. That's so true. Okay, I'm glad you really like that part. Thank you. And so, where's your thinking going now? Because I know you have a new book coming out. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So it just came out. It's called Dark Horse. So here's where my thinking is, and I'll ramble and you interrupt me, and then Paul can edit it out and make us. So one of the things that I found in sort of thinking about End of Average and the shift toward a more personalized society, because by the way, that's happening whether we like it or not. Totally. That's just where things are going. But it doesn't mean it will end well. It doesn't mean it will be fair. And I think that left alone, this shift to personalization is going to benefit people for whom the system already worked for. Yeah. And it's going to the folks like us, like that where who's ever really struggled, it's really not going to be better. And we just have to design it that way. Yeah. So one of the things that, off of End of Average, I'm a professor, but I also have a think tank called Populous, which is meant to get these ideas to the public. Yeah. And one of the things that we've learned over the last couple of years is that, this idea of individuality and personalization in a vacuum, it can go to places that you don't really want to go. Yeah. And so one of the things that we've realized is that you have to put the outcome, like what is it that we're using this for? Like what are we trying to accomplish? Mm-hmm. And so Dark Horse is kind of an interesting thing. So Alpha and End of Average, I was like super curious about people who were successful that nobody saw coming. Right. Just classic, what we call a dark horse.
Totally, yeah.
Nobody had ever studied them. Mm-hmm. Like nobody. And I thought, well, I wonder if there's something I could learn from them. Yeah. And it was my first qualitative research. I've always been quantitative, and I'm a convert now. I think it's
I know, me too.
So much by listening to people, it's pretty surprising. Yeah. So we studied hundreds of people from all walks of life who the only criteria was that they were successful at what they did, mm-hmm. and they didn't have a traditional path.
Oh, right? Wow.
And what was fascinating is I thought that maybe what they'd have in common is some kind of personality, maybe a Steve Jobs or Richard Branson, you don't mind bucking the system, and that,
Yeah.
Just turned out not to be true. They were all over the place, and what kept coming forward was that to a person, they had chosen to prioritize personal fulfillment as their view of success, right? Rather than somebody else's definition. Yeah. And as soon as you did that, and you made it personal, meaning I want to achieve things that matter to me, mm-hmm. well, then it's personal, and it's gonna put you on an individual path. And then what we found is that ultimately was what made people be able to be happy and successful. Totally. So that work led to a series of what we call the dark horse mindset. So how would a person actually take this on and live a fulfilling life and still have a stable path to being successful?
Wow, I can't wait to read that book. That'll be my Christmas read. It's perfect. Okay, so everyone go buy and read Todd's new book. That's perfect. So thinking about that now, are there any how, because you're really good at making things accessible, right? Like making it like so that it's not too jargony. And so what were were there any kind of metaphors or kind of ideas that came out of that book that you think are gonna like be really impactful?
Yeah, so I would say in this case it's more about it's a little more kind of like I almost want to say self-help. It's almost like digging to that rather than big ideas like end of average. And so I relied more on really good storytelling of just people's amazing lives. Rather than needing the sort of overarching metaphors, which I think for abstract concepts you really
totally need. And you know what I find every day is people love the story. They love it. So, like they can connect to it. I never thought in a million years that I would have a job telling stories. So it's pretty phenomenal. It's pretty phenomenal. Okay, so my next question is kind of, about you. If you had a vision for, if you could think about your experience in school, if you had a vision for how you wish it was different, what would be your ideal? What would be your ideal?
So, we think a lot about this. Part of our work is to think about what the future of education looks like. And I think that for me, there's a handful of things that I think just have to be true, right, in an ideal situation. First is, even though I had a bad experience for most of my educational life, and then I didn't, right? And I had a reasonably good experience. I still think it comes down to the human relationships, which means that you're either going to trust your teachers or you're not. And if you don't trust your teachers, it's already over. And no amount of technology, no amount of is going to substitute for a quality teacher. And I feel like right now there are a lot of the personalization efforts are algorithmic and tech-based, as if you're going to kind of go around these committed professionals, and I think it's just a bad idea. And so the first thing is that whatever we do, it really has to center on the student and the teacher, and the students and the students, right? Those human relationships, and you make choices about the technology that actually support that, right?
It's a tool.
In a perfect world, this is what I would do. First, as we've already kind of started talking about, it's nonsensical that education is the last place that still designs on average. You can't.
Totally.
It's ridiculous. And you can start with the people who are making money.
That's it. That's it.
No more. You design a flexible environment. We have good frameworks like Universal Design for Learning.
Totally.
Start there. It's just unacceptable. If the military can do that, so can we.
Totally.
Right? And I think that's gonna help a lot. I think people will be shocked at how many kids don't get into a rut to begin with, don't fall behind, don't get deflated, don't lose a sense of confidence. So flexible design is just a must. That's the first thing. The second thing is we absolutely have to have, it's got to be mastery-based learning. It cannot be fixed time and grades.
Thank you. Todd Rose, you are speaking to my heart. Yes.
I don't care how one kid compares to another kid sitting next to them.
Exactly.
What I want to know is, have you mastered the ideas, the knowledge, the skills that you need to be able to live the life that you want to live?
Exactly.
Period. And if it takes a little more time, it takes a little more time. And the good news is especially in the States, mastery-based learning is something that is just widely accepted as where we're going. So I think that's good. Now, whether it gets done well or not, we'll see.
Totally.
So flexible design, mastery-based learning. The other thing is whether people like it or not, we've got to cede a little more control to the students themselves. Not Lord of the Flies, and right? I still want teachers playing a really vital role, but part of what I need to learn is how to make good choices, how to know who I am, make decisions based on that, and what better place to do that than in the supportive environment of education?
Absolutely.
And so I feel like when you combine those things, I'm also very, very a big believer in the sense that students are going to need like this combination of, I want kids who understand civics. I want them to deeply understand, especially in free societies, like what their rights and responsibilities are and how to affect change if you want it. And I want kids to be able to have a wide sampling of what society has to offer.
Yeah.
Right? So, because like if a kid ends up, if a young woman decides she wants to be a mechanic, I'm all for that, and that's a success, provided that was actually a choice. Provided
not this illusion of last resortness. Yeah,
like we gave her some test and put her on a track that like only this. And so like I feel like the only way, I grew up in rural America, and like I didn't know what society had to offer, right? So like I want kids, I want a focus on exposure to things, and like I think that if you come out of high school with a good understanding of what you care about, and heck, even if you just come out with stuff you hate,
narrow your focus. No, it's so true.
I really want that, and I just think that like we know for sure that we can't predict the jobs kids are going to be in anymore, and so we have to make a different bet, which is equipping kids to be able to live in that kind of world that's going to be uncertain in ways that we haven't had to deal with. And
have to like navigate those unpredictable situations, right? And it's really, my supervisor, Leighton Schnellert, he really talks about, the shift of curriculum away from this transmissive kind of like, I'm going to bestow upon you knowledge, to like more the facilitator role in helping kids to transform. And so it's all so aligned, and yes, we're on the same page, Todd. Okay, so a couple more questions. This question is kind of, I think about this for myself because I barely made it through school, and I always think to myself, like, what advice, if I could go back to my 13-year-old self, like, what would I tell them? So if you could go back to if you think about like in the middle of the mess of school that you struggled, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I would say two things. One, it actually does get better.
It does. It's true.
You just can't see that like life outside of even high school could be different. And that like I would say like the most important thing is don't lose confidence in yourself. Like be humble about it and learn that like don't give up who you are. Right? Like the reason that it's not working right now is not because there's something wrong with you. Right? Like that it is a product of the design of our system. It is built for kids to fail. Like that's just a fact.
It totally is.
For some kids to fail at least. And so for me it's about understanding that like those struggles aren't just on me. I mean, I'm sure I played my part, but like and that like the other thing that I would say is like I wish I didn't extend like a lot of coping mechanisms that allowed me to not completely hate myself as a function of like doing so poorly in school that are really productive, I think, in the moment, and then there are things that you have to undo if you're really going to want to move on and have a productive life.
So what was the moment? What was the turnaround moment for you?
So there were a couple actually. So one was out of like grim necessity. So after I failed out of high school, my girlfriend got pregnant, and she's still my wife today. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So suddenly I was without a high school diploma. Within the first couple of years, we ended up having 2 kids, and I had worked about 10 minimum wage jobs just bouncing around, and we were on welfare, and like it's just bad, right? Like and like I couldn't figure out why my choices didn't seem to work out the way that I thought they would, right? Like I was trying, it just didn't seem to work. So that moment of like actually having kids and realizing that like it's one thing to mess up your own life and a whole other thing to like, I don't want to pass that on, right? Like I want them to have a shot at leading the life they want to live. So that gave me the sort of motivation to say, I got to figure it out. And then it was funny, like it was actually my dad. So he's the first high school graduate in my entire family. And when I was a kid, he decided to go to college at night and became a mechanical engineer.
Oh, wow.
And it was amazing. And I watched, he was a mechanic to start with and then mechanical engineer. And I watched that. I watched education change our family and change our life circumstances, and so we developed a really good relationship, believe it or not, after I failed out of school. And people were frustrated. My in-laws were frustrated, rightly. Like I didn't seem to be able to hold a job, and people said I was lazy. And my dad pulled me aside one day and said, "Look, I don't think you're lazy. I think you have to be motivated all the time. You have to, So he said, you got to figure out what you care about and live there. He felt like I was pretty extreme in that sense. And I think it's true. When I'm not interested, I'm probably the worst.
So
terrible employee. So I got to make sure I'm doing things that I care about. And so he said he felt like he thought that there are probably jobs where people pay you a lot of money given the kind of qualities I have. He said, but you can't get there from where you are right now. He thought I either needed to be an entrepreneur or actually go to school. And I didn't have any money, so I would be a terrible entrepreneur, truth be told. But I like that. I like it. I just I don't have a good business sense. So so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go to school. So I got my GED. And I started going to school at night while I was working during the day. And that process led me. I had some really wonderful human relationships with people who were taught me something about myself, and that really was the turnaround for me. Yeah.
Wow. That's quite the journey, my friend. Good for you. Okay, so there's going to be some people listening to this podcast, and they're going to be thinking of kids in their classroom right now who are struggling. And so what are let's say your top 3 nuggets, what do you want them to take away from this conversation?
So I believe, so first of all, thank you to everyone who does this work.
Totally.
It matters in a way that you can't comprehend. Yeah. Being squeezed by standardization and not being able to do the work you always want to do. It does matter. It just often pays off down the road. So thank you. And the thing that I would say is that, when you see kids who are struggling, almost inevitably it leads to behavioral issues, whether that's internalizing or externalizing, and those kids can be extremely frustrating to be around.
Absolutely.
I was one of those kids, but I think that the single most important thing is just being known. And the times where it was almost magical for me was when a teacher take a little bit of time to get to know me, and not just in the things I'm not doing well right now, right? But take an interest in who I am. I think you'll be surprised. When people feel truly valued and that you really want to know me, most of the time when kids get into that mode where they don't want to disappoint you anymore because they really feel that connection, it's terrific. So I feel it's so easy to get caught up in what they're not doing and all the problems we got to fix or whatever, and that's okay. Some of that is necessary, but don't overlook that there's a real kid there, and it just takes one person to connect with them.
And that's I think what was my turning point is exactly that. Someone cared. They saw through the mess. Yeah.
And what's funny is what this is why I said my number one thing is you either trust your teachers or you don't, because and I do. And here's the thing. I'm not saying we don't need to do better at professional development and pre-service stuff. We do. But that's not the teacher's fault. That's our fault in preparing professionals.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it is about these relationships, and again, no tech is going to replace that. So I want kids. I think worldwide you're seeing this incredible rise of loneliness and kids just not feeling like they belong, and I think that's so devastating, and I think that teachers play such a vital role.
Todd, okay, well that's my interview. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I'm actually just interested. So you're doing, there's curriculum redesign going on now.
Yeah.
And how big is that scope?
I think this is the first time, because usually curriculum will kind of shift like a little bit at a time. Like we'll do like math this year, but this is the first time it's done a full K-12 shift at the same time. And so it's been within kind of this 3-year window, they've evolved the whole thing, and it's really been a shift. There's still content knowledge, but the emphasis has been decreased to make room for competencies. And so it's really changing not just the curriculum goals, but the conceptual model of, the ratio between how much content and how much competency. And it's less that if you know it, but what you do with that knowledge, that's really amazing. I think the most exciting part is we don't have standardized exams anymore.
Really?
Like even in grade 12, they kind of have these two literacy, numeracy, low stakes exams, and they're not connected to a course. They're more over your education career, and they're low stakes, so kids can use them if they need them.
Wow.
So it's really exciting, and it's not across Canada. This is a BC kind of led initiative, so people are watching to kind of see what happens.
Well, what I'm excited about is and this would be kind of my final thought here. I think that, and not just trying to be wishful thinking, just I think it's an empirical fact that kids are capable of more than we've imagined.
Yeah.
And that right now, we often think that kids, there's just innately talented people, and some people just don't have it, and that's why we have the system we have. But I actually think it's the other way around, that we designed a system that assumed only some people were going to be capable.
It's so true.
You put a bell curve over everybody, and you force it to be true. And I think what's really, really interesting about these kind of efforts is that early on, it's always messy, by the way, as I'm sure you know. It always is messy.
Every time.
But you just see that, how much ability and passion there really is. And I think that there isn't a country on earth that doesn't need more of that. And to think that our curricular approaches and have actually been the bottleneck on human capacity, and
it's ridiculous.
It is.
It doesn't make sense.
It's unnecessary, and that what I'm also interested with these kind of efforts, and we see them in the States too, is hopefully the people in charge. It's the signs of success of this kind of change are not test score improvements initially, right?
Yeah.
There's these other characteristics like kids' engagement and even just absenteeism. Kids
for sure.
come to school more.
Yeah.
They are more engaged, and there's a wealth of literature that increased engagement leads to better performance. So it's looking at stuff that will likely change first.
Yeah.
Will then lead downstream to sort of more traditional improvements.
Yeah.
And not cutting it short before it has a chance to prove its worth.
Well, and I think one of the biggest indicators is the decrease in behavior. Right? And so, that is an epidemic right now, because we're just forcing these kids into these boxes, Thank you, Todd. You're making a difference. Your story has an impact, and you're changing people's minds. So thank you for that. So Todd, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Okay, so that was Todd. What do you think? It was good, hey? Doesn't he just have so many little nuggets of wisdom? I was listening back at the interview and just kind of writing down some quotes, and I'm like, oh, this is content for the month. So be prepared, Twitter. I'm going to be sending out some little Todd Rose quoting gems. So thanks again, Todd, for emailing me back and making time for us to have this conversation. As he was talking, I just kept saying to my head, yes, 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 yes. It just, everything he was saying just resonates with me so much. And I gotta say, I am so pumped. Both Paul and I are pretty excited that he likes the video, and how he liked the part that we added about self-adjustments. Validation does feel so good. 4 big ideas that Todd Rose talks about that I think are really, really good takeaways, and things that I think we can all really work towards to make a difference. Number 1, human relationships. Isn't that just so the truth? The more I'm in education, the more I realize that really just is the number 1. It's foundational. I know if I think back on turning points for me in my education, it was people, right? People who made the time to care. The second one, flexible design. Design keeps coming back over and over and over again. My mantra in life is becoming universal design. So I think what Todd Rose really helps us to see is the shift from universal design to universal design for learning. And, it's funny because we really understand universal design in the physical world when it's tangible and we can touch it. But for some reason, we have this really big disconnect as soon as it becomes intellectual design. And all of a sudden it becomes, like we're cheating. So I think if we really kind of make that effort to see, the ramps of buildings is similar to the ramps that we need in our brains. It's the exact same thing in, flexible design and allowing people to have the supports when they need it it's just called adulting. The third one that he pointed out is mastery-based teaching, and I gotta say, I'm reading a lot about this because it's really also connecting to assessment and mastery-based learning. And I just the more I read about it and learn about it, the more I'm like, I don't know how we can operate in any other way. It just makes so much more sense. So go look this up if you haven't before, because it's once you see it, you can't unsee it. It totally makes sense. And it's basically this idea that we're not in comparison with other people and we're allowed to have our own paths, and it makes goals really, really important. And but we can meet those goals in different ways, and so I think it gives us kind of permission to release the burden of standardization. Even I think we have more room and more flexibility, even if we're still in a standardized system. So not SMBC, but in other places that are listening. And last but not least, number 4, the fourth big idea that he pointed out was, being able to hand over more control to kids. And that to me is just self-regulated learning at its finest. I think there's been some huge misunderstandings around self-regulation. I think I've mentioned it before, but, a lot of times we look at how to support kids to regulate so that they can be compliant, as opposed to how do we support kids to regulate so they can meet a goal, which I really see is the difference between just self-regulation to be green and self-regulation for learning. And we have some of the best researchers around that in the world right here in Canada. So you can see all of these 4 big ideas are just so connected to inclusive education, and which is why you can see why I love Todd Rose so much. But these ideas are just good for all kids, which just comes back to that UDL piece. I'm going to end off with, my favorite quote of the interview, and that is what Todd's dad said to him, because I feel like this was actually said to me in some way, but his dad said, "Todd, I don't think you're lazy. I think that you need to find out what you care about and live there." And if there was like one slogan that I could say would be my goal for education, that would be it. What do you care about? What are you good at? What do you have to offer? What do you have to contribute? And I really believe that every kid, we can apply that criteria too. So I agree with Todd. I think that we are all way more capable than we could ever imagine, and there's just so much more possibility and ability and passion that lives around us. And I think that the more that we stop focusing on the opposite of those things, the more that we're going to be able to see it. So let's just really start changing the narrative and start looking at our strengths, even ours. And I know as Canadians we're humble people, but I don't see this as bragging. I don't see this as blowing up our head. But what I do, I know if you know about the author Monique Grace Smith, who's an author in Canada, she has such a nice way of looking at this. She says, you can't give your gifts away until you know what gifts you bring, which I think is just a really, really nice, wrap up to this whole conversation about, who are we? What are our strengths? How do we share those with others? And that's really what our contributions are. So thank you to Todd. Thank you to all of you who are listening. Thank you to Paul and to Jill and everyone who's just making this little journey that we're on so fun. Go order Dark Horse, which is Todd Rose's new book. I just ordered a copy. It's going to be my Christmas break reading. I'm going to take it with me to New York. Jessica and I are heading there next week. We're going to be there for a few days. I have family that lives in New York, so we go there every other year for the dreamiest Christmas ever. And so we will have a video strategy as content coming out next Monday, and then we're going to take a break because both us and you need to take some time off for Christmas and New Year's. And then we will have a brand new 5 More Minutes episode ready for you on January the 7th. So I will be wishing everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from my family, both today and also on the day I'll be in New York City, thinking of all of you. And yes, kiss your family, kiss your friends, kiss your puppies. And I hope that all of you have a really, really nice break. We will see you soon. You can find 5 More Minutes on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, Instagram, Spotify, Twitter, and on 5moreminutes.com. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. See you next time. The 5 More Minutes podcast is written by Shelley Moore and produced by Paul Madsen.